everybody. It's the weekend, so I've got some time and I thought I would make a video to follow up with you all on my mini album series. So on my group Scrapbooking and Crafty Pieces on Facebook, you can find all these printables that I've created. I just thought it would be easier to have them as a reference point if you would like to use them. There's 3. So the first one is video 1, tools and supplies. I've actually already made that video, so you can find this printable on the group. If you have any trouble finding it, let me know. But these are the things that I use when I make a mini album. This second printable, planning your album, is about this video 2 in the series. So I just sat down and I thought about what are all the things that I think about when I'm making an album, and what are all the, I guess, tips and tricks that I've learned along the way of making these albums over the years that you need to think about to pull together all of the things to make a particular album for a particular purpose. So I thought I'd just use this album because I had it handy. This was an album I made. I've got a video on this, I think, for a girls' weekend down to Melbourne to see Harry Potter and the Cursed Child. So I knew I didn't have a lot of photos that I wanted to add to this. I knew there was quite a bit of journaling. Certain things I had more photos. I wanted some inserts. So I'll use this, I guess, as an aid to explain better what I'm talking about. So some of the questions are here, and you can print this out and use it once, or you can have it as a reference or reprint it for every album that you make until you get the hang of it. But these are some of the questions. So why are you making this album? So is it for yourself? Is it for someone else? Is it a gift? Is it to document a particular event or occasion? Who is it going to? So, here's some of the reasons you would do it. Is it an heirloom, a memento? So just thinking about the reason you're making this album is a good place to start. Then I think you need to think about how many photos does the album need to hold. So I printed out my photos first, then I went through and looked at, what I had. Some of the photos I printed full size. Some of them I trimmed down to fit my particular page. So there's a full size one there. Others I printed 2 to a page. You can see here I've got vertical and landscape photos that I've used in my Project Life app to create 2 to a page and printed at home on my Canon Selfie. So I gathered together all the photos that I was using and figured out how many does it need to hold. You've also got to think about who are you making the album for. So I've made albums for people that have never seen this type of mini album before, and too many flips and flaps and magnets and pulls and inserts. It's just confusing to some people. So you've got to think about how simple does it need to be. Is it an elderly person, for example, who might not be able to use the album the way it's intended? So just think about all these things before you put your album together. The photo sizes, so portrait, landscape, the sizes, I've just put a little table there so that you can record how many and you don't forget, because you don't want to have to keep counting them. The next bits are you going to use punched or die cut elements? Now this was a super quick album that I made and I didn't. Oh, I lie, I did here, but this was only on one pocket. So if you're going to use a punch, you probably want to use it throughout the album. I really only had this one pocket. If you're going to use dies to cut an edge on things, for example, pull them together. It's useful to have a basket or something as a project file so that you can keep all the things you're using together. So think about, do you want to use those elements? And then what paper collection are you going to use? I would highly recommend using a paper collection rather than papers that don't necessarily coordinate, because that takes out a lot of the worry, I guess, in decorating the album. Now, I just pulled a paper collection here. This one happens to be Cocoa Vanilla Love Always, but these types of collection kits are great because they come with stickers and chipboard and all those kinds of things together. So something like this is a really useful thing to have, so I would pull that out together. And then you want to check your supplies. So you want to check you've got chipboard to make the covers, enough cardstock to make the pages, enough pattern paper, enough adhesive, both wet and dry, spare trimmer blades, and if you're using the magnets. So I think checking before you're starting to make the album is a good thing, because if you need to stop halfway through, it's really annoying. Another thing is, do you want to ink the edges throughout your album? I have in this album, so around, I don't know if you can see it very well, but around this frame you can see that I've used Tim Holtz Distress ink around there, and on the pages I've actually inked around all the edges as well, but you don't have to do that. It's just thinking about, well, if you're going to ink, what colour you'll use. I've repeated here, how many photos does it need to hold, because that question applies to the next question, which is how many photos per base page will you plan on? Now, this is where it starts to get into the nitty-gritty of constructing the album, because I personally usually do between 4 and 6 pages in an album. You could do 3, you could do 5. I tend to like even numbers, but there's no right or wrong here. But if you figure out how many pages you want, the thickness of the embellishments you use, because that will impact the size of the gusset in between each page. This is actually only a 1/4 inch gusset in this album because I really just use stickers and flat things like that. But the more interactive and the more photos each base page needs to hold, the wider your gussets need to be. So this unit is a base page. So this base page has a flip, and that's all this one has. This one actually just has an insert, but it depends on how many flips and flaps and things you're going to add and how many photos you're going to add as to how wide that actual gusset needs to be, which impacts the width of the spine. Now, you probably don't want a mini album that's this wide. So you want to think about how many base pages you're having, and you may adjust how many photos that you want to put in the album. You might just put the best ones or a selection rather than all of them. So if you figure out how many photos and how many photos per base page, that'll tell you your number of pages. So the most common album sizes are sort of 6x6, 8x8, 10x10, 5x7, 6x8, 8x10, but you can make any size you want. You're making this, so you can make it however big you want. And the way that these types of albums are constructed, you can have top pockets, side pockets, or no pockets. So what I mean by that is this page, I've actually just glued it together. It has no pockets, but the hinges are on the side. So in effect, what a base page is a flat piece of cardstock with hinges on either side. It sticks together and inserts onto the hinge. So you can have an opening which allows you to insert things. So this is the opening on this side. So it's joined here and here. Here it was open, but that's where I've adhered it to the hinge. So I've got side pockets here. You can actually join it here and here and have a top pocket if you want to. So you just have to think about, do you want pockets and where you want them to be before you construct your album. And you can actually construct with no pockets as well. So there's a no pockets tick box there. And if you want no pockets, you can just adhere a piece of paper to one side of the hinge, or there's other ways you can actually create a no pocket album, and I'll go through that in a separate video for you. So we talked about the gussets, but hinge planning is something that's really important. So the more interaction, the more photos, and the thicker the embellishments, the wider the gusset. So you probably want to do 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch, 3/4 inch is pretty big. Or you can make your own measurement. You could do it in centimeters, whatever works for you. But you really want to think about that, because if you don't do your gussets wide enough and you make them too fat, the album, they call it crocodiles. It gets too big for its cover and you can't close it properly, which puts stress on the corners, and you don't want that. So you want to think about that now and plan your hinges appropriately. Now, this third printable, designing and drawing your album pages, I've actually just created this as a guide. So I tend to just do this on blank paper or in a notebook. But really what you're wanting to do is you've got your inside front cover, first page, second page, third page. I've done this for 6 pages, and your inside back cover. Now on there, you just have to figure out, are you going to have any magnets? Just put a circle where you're going to put a magnet to remind you that you need to do that, because you want to do that before you put any papers on. But what do you want on there? So you might want a tag coming from the side. You might want tags that are actually going into a pocket like this one. You just have to think about what each page is going to be designed to do. So this is meant to draw on. So for example, you might want to have a pocket here and a tag. So I usually write on there what it is. Tag pocket, so that would help you with what you're doing. that doesn't need any magnets. So here you might want a flip that goes across here and another flip that is bigger that goes across there and a magnet on there. This particular page has no tags, but on the back of the page, so what I mean by the front and the back is that this is the front of the page and this is the back of the page. So you can have separate interactive elements on both sides. So this little sheet just helps you draw out what they're going to be. You might just want to put a simple belly band on there and a tag here. So you need one tag and that size is going to be whatever, and you'd write it down there. So this just allows you to plan out your album so that when you're cutting all your cardstock, you know exactly what you're cutting. So if your album was going to be 6x6, your tag might be 4x4, for example. So you just have to think about that when you're planning the album. And don't forget, if there's flaps here, you want to add on enough so that you've got hinges to attach those flaps. So when you're planning out your interactive elements, don't just measure for the front, you've got to measure for a hinge as well. So hopefully these printables will help you plan your album, and then it'll just make everything much easier when you go to put it together, because you've already thought about it, you've got it written down, you know how many pages, you know how many photos, you know what paper collection, and you're good to go. So hopefully that helps you with planning the album, which is the next stage. The next video I'll make will actually be creating the album. So I might just make a really simple album that I can create with you, and we can walk through step by step so that there's one element per page and we can walk it through and make the album together. So if you've got these printables, feel free to use them, print them out, make sure you've got all your supplies. Any questions, let me know. Reach out through any of the mediums and I will answer them for you, and I look forward to making an album with you. Thanks, bye.